Dad, you won't be welcome here for Christmas. Victoria's parents expect a certain atmosphere. Those words from my son Marcus cut deeper than any betrayal I'd known. What they didn't realize was that this old trucker had built an empire worth millions, not just a few trucks. I smiled, walked to my Silverado, and made one phone call. By New Year's, their $2 $100 monthly lifeline was gone forever. Sometimes people who look down on you forget who's been holding them up. You won't believe the price they paid for their arrogance. Before I dive into how Michael turns the tables on his ungrateful family, I'm curious, where are you listening to this story of family betrayal and ultimate justice? Are you at home contemplating your family relationships? Or perhaps driving to work, thinking about respect and boundaries? Leave a comment and let me know how this story's playing out today. I stood in the marble foyer of the Austin mansion, watching my son avoid my eyes like I was an embarrassment. The same boy I'd raised alone after Carmen died. The same man whose mortgage I'd been secretly covering for 7.5 years at $2,100 every month. What kind of atmosphere would that be? Son, Marcus looked at me with disgust. Dad, you're just a truck driver. You smell like diesel. You eat with your hands. And you tell boring road stories. Victoria's parents are sophisticated people. They don't need to hear about truck stops from some blue-collar nobody. Blue-collar nobody, if only they knew. Marcus, I work hard. I've always provided for this family. He laughed. Provided, Dad. You drive a beat-up truck and live in that tiny house. Victoria and I struggle to make ends meet while you contribute your pathetic driver's salary. We need real money, not scraps from your paycheck. Victoria appeared in the kitchen doorway, her designer dress gleaming under the chandelier I'd unknowingly paid for. Tell him about Christmas dinner. Honey, how my parents specifically asked that the working class help not be invited. The help, I repeated slowly. Dad, Victoria's father owns 3 car dealerships. Her mother comes from old Austin money. You're just a working class driver who doesn't understand how educated people live. Marcus gestured around the house like he'd built it himself. This is what success looks like. You don't fit in our world anymore. I looked around the house, knowing every mortgage payment, every renovation cost, every luxury my hidden wealth had provided. They thought Victoria's family money paid for everything. They had no idea Anderson Trucking was one of the largest freight companies in Texas. That my beat-up truck was just one of over 200 vehicles in my fleet. You think Victoria's family paid for all this? Of course. Victoria's trust fund, her father's connections. We live in a different world now. A world where people like you don't fit. You're uneducated, poor, and beneath us. Victoria nodded eagerly. My parents said, we don't want some greasy truck driver ruining our holiday meal. You don't belong here. Michael, this is a world for successful, educated people. Standing in a house I'd secretly purchased while being called a greasy truck driver made my vision blur with rage. They thought they were living off her family's money while barely tolerating my small contributions. Marcus, what do you think actually pays for this house? He scoffed. Victoria's family money. Obviously, I make decent money, but not mansion money. We're lucky her parents are so generous. Unlike some people who can barely contribute anything meaningful. I stood slowly, hands shaking with rage. 7.5 years of secretly funding their lifestyle while they looked down on me as a poor, uneducated driver. I see, I said, walking toward the door. Don't be dramatic. Maybe we can grab lunch at some truck stop next week, somewhere more appropriate for your social class. I stopped at the door. The truck stop comment was the final insult. Marcus, you just made the biggest mistake of your miserable, ungrateful life. The December air hit my face as I walked to my Silverado, the same truck they mocked. Not knowing it was just my personal vehicle while my company operated a fleet worth $50 million. Behind me, Victoria laughed. Did you see his face? He actually thought he belonged with successful people. I sat in my truck, gripping the steering wheel. They thought I was a poor, uneducated driver barely scraping by. They had no idea that every luxury they enjoyed came from the bank account of the greasy truck driver they just humiliated. My phone buzzed, probably Marcus wanting to add more insults. Instead, I turned the key and drove into the darkness, leaving behind the house my hidden empire had bought. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. Sometimes people who look down on you forget to check exactly who's been holding them up. My phone rang as I sat in my driveway. Victoria's name flashed like a warning. Perfect. I'd been waiting years for this conversation. I answered on the fourth ring. Michael, her voice dripped fake sweetness. I heard about your little tantrum with Marcus. Tantrum. I leaned back. I don't think there's any misunderstanding. Victoria, look, you pathetic old man. Let me spell this out. My parents are coming for a civilized Christmas with civilized people, not some greasy, uneducated truck driver who smells like motor oil and embarrasses everyone. The mask was completely off. Victoria, I think you're forgetting something important. She laughed cruelly. What that you're family, Michael? You're not family. You're a charity case we've been tolerating. A broke old fool who thinks driving trucks makes him matter? A broke old fool, I repeated. Exactly. You live in that disgusting little house, drive that piece of junk truck, and make what? $40,000 a year. My father wipes his ass with more money than you'll see in your lifetime. I kept my voice steady. And the money I've been sending you, what money? She scoffed. Those pathetic contributions, 200 here, 300 there. That's pocket change. My weekly manicure costs more than your monthly help. We've been humoring you, letting you think you're contributing when you're basically giving us lunch money. The delusion was breathtaking. She believed I was sending them scraps. Don't act like you're some benefactor. You're a nobody who got lucky marrying Carmen. And even she knew her place. She cleaned houses and kept her mouth shut. She understood she was beneath people like us. My hand tightened around the phone. What did you say about my wife? I said she was a maid who knew her place. Unlike you. She didn't pretend to belong at the adults' table. She cleaned toilets and was grateful for it. At least she had self-awareness about what she was. Carmen worked herself to death paying for Marcus's education. Carmen was hired help who got above her station. And you're just a dumb truck driver who thinks he matters. My parents asked, why do we have to pretend that uneducated peasant belongs with decent people? They're right. Victoria, Afrosinonen. No, let me finish. You worthless piece of trash. You want to know what we really think you're an embarrassment. A joke. When friends ask about Marcus's family, I lie. I tell them his father is dead because I'm ashamed my husband comes from such pathetic white trash stock. Silence stretched like a loaded gun. We're done, I said quietly. Done, you can't be done with us. Michael, we're the best thing that happened to your miserable bloodline. Without us, you're just another broke loser driving trucks until you die alone in that shithole house. I ended the call and sat in sudden silence. White trash, worthless piece of trash, embarrassment, joke. I walked to my desk and pulled out the folder I'd been avoiding. Bank statements showing 7.5 years of automatic transfers. $2,100 every month. $189,000 total. Money she thought was pocket change from her family's trust fund. I dialed my bank. First National, this is Jennifer. I need to cancel an automatic transfer. $2,100 monthly to Wells Fargo. How long have you been making this transfer? Sir, 7.5 years. Cancel it effective immediately. Done, sir. Anything else? No, that's everything. I hung up and poured the good whiskey. The house felt different, cleaner, like poison had been drained from the air. For the first time in 7.5 years, I wouldn't be funding the lifestyle of people who called me white trash while spending my money. My phone buzzed with a text, probably Victoria wanting to add more insults. I didn't check it. Instead, I raised my glass to the empty room. Tomorrow, the worthless piece of trash would teach them their first lesson about respect. The next morning, my phone rang at exactly 10:47. Victoria's name flashed like a neon stupidity sign. Michael, I need you to pick up my parents from Austin Bergstrom Airport. Their flight arrives at 2 o'clock. I set down my coffee. Victoria, did you forget about our conversation last night? Look, whatever that was about, we need to focus on practical matters. My parents need transportation, and you're the only one available during the day. Less than 12 hours after calling me worthless white trash, she expected me to be their chauffeur. And you're asking me because that's what family does. Besides, let's be honest, you're just a truck driver with time on his hands. Just a truck driver. If only she knew Anderson Trucking had contracts worth $8 million this quarter. What airline? I asked quietly. Southwest Flight 1247, Baggage Claim Carousel 3, and Michael. They're expecting someone who can handle luggage properly. Don't embarrass us. Of course, I'll take care of everything. Good, wear something decent. They notice appearance. She hung up without saying thank you. I looked at my clock. 10:52, plenty of time. I poured another coffee and opened yesterday's crossword. 7 across, delayed gratification, 12 letters. At 2:15, I was in my armchair with Earl Grey and the Sunday paper. My phone buzzed with Victoria's name. I let it ring. By 3:30, my phone had buzzed 6 times. I'd finished the paper and organized my junk drawer. Amazing what you accomplished when you weren't serving people who considered you their servant. 4:15. The phone rang constantly now. Victoria. Then unknown numbers. Probably her parents borrowing phones at the airport. I turned my phone completely off. Perfect silence. I made grilled cheese and tomato soup, comfort food I denied myself while subsidizing their lifestyle. Outside. December sun was setting. Somewhere across town, 3 people were arguing about taxi fares, wondering how their personal servant had stranded them. The thought made my soup taste better. By 5, someone was pounding on my door. Not knocking, pounding. I opened it to find William Hayes pushing into my living room uninvited. What the hell is wrong with you? We waited 3 hours. Elizabeth followed, hair disheveled. This is barbaric behavior. Michael? Victoria entered last, makeup smeared. You humiliated us. My parents took a $60 taxi. Get out of my house, I said quietly. They stopped. Shocked by the steel in my tone. You don't make demands here, William sputtered. I have connections. Important people who can make your pathetic life very difficult. Is that a threat? It's a promise. You think abandoning people at airports has no consequences? You're about to learn how wrong you are. Elizabeth smiled like a blade. Actions have consequences. Michael, yours will be quite public. They left like a defeated army, but William turned back. You'll regret this, I guarantee it. I closed the door and turned the deadbolt through the window. I watched them drive away, still arguing. The house felt cleaner, but their words echoed public consequences. Important people. Connections. For the first time, I felt slight concern, but it was overwhelmed by anticipation. 3 people had just declared war on someone they thought was a broke truck driver. They had no idea what they'd started. 3 days later, I was enjoying morning coffee when I saw my own face staring back from page 3 of the Austin Herald. The headline read, Local truck driver abandons elderly couple at airport during holiday storm. My hands went still around the coffee mug. There I was in black and white, an old photo from some trucking industry newsletter. Below it, a story that made my blood run cold and my temper flare. William and Elizabeth Hayes, visiting their daughter for Christmas, were left stranded at Austin Bergstrom Airport for over 4 hours Sunday when family member Michael Anderson failed to appear for a prearranged pickup. Family member. They made it sound like I was their devoted son-in-law. The couple, both in their late 60s, waited in frigid temperatures as a winter storm warning was issued for the region. Winter storm warning. It had been 72 degrees and sunny. We couldn't believe someone would just abandon us like that, said William Hayes, a retired banking executive. We called repeatedly, but Mr. Anderson never answered his phone. We were forced to take an expensive taxi in dangerous weather conditions. At our age, this kind of treatment isn't just inconsiderate, it's dangerous. The article continued with quotes about my pattern of erratic behavior and concerns about my mental state. Surrendere, William had painted himself and Elizabeth as helpless victims of a cruel truck driver who'd suddenly snapped without provocation. No mention of the Christmas dinner rejection. No context about their years of financial exploitation. No reference to Victoria's white trash phone call. Just me, the villain who abandoned poor elderly tourists during a blizzard that existed only in William's imagination. I read the article again, then a third time. The byline belonged to Rachel Thompson, lifestyle editor. I didn't recognize the name, but I recognized the strategy. William had called in favors, used his banking connections to plant this story exactly where it would do maximum damage to a working-class truck driver's reputation. Smart, very smart. For the first time since this mess started, I felt grudging respect for my opponents. They weren't just entitled rich people throwing tantrums. They were strategic, calculating. They understood that in a city like Austin, reputation was everything. One well-placed newspaper article could destroy decades of hard work. They declared total war. I folded the newspaper carefully and pulled out my laptop. This wasn't about airport pickups anymore. This wasn't about Christmas dinner or mortgage payments. This was about winning. I began typing names into search engines. William Hayes, Elizabeth Hayes, Victoria Anderson. Their social media profiles, their connections, their habits, their weaknesses, everything they'd foolishly made public over the years. If they wanted to play chess, I'd show them what a real strategist looked like. I glanced at my wall calendar. December 21st, 3 days until Christmas Eve. 3 days to plan something they'd never forget. My phone stayed silent. No apologies, no second thoughts, no regrets from anyone involved. Perfect. It meant they were all in on this war. Time to show them what happens when you underestimate a truck driver who built an empire they knew nothing about. I spent the next 3 days living in a different world. Not as Michael Anderson, the humiliated truck driver getting destroyed in the press, but as Michael Anderson, strategic thinker who'd built Anderson Trucking into a $50 million operation. My laptop became command central. Social media profiles filled my browser tabs like playing cards in a high-stakes game. William Hayes, retired First National Bank manager, member of Austin Country Club, treasurer of Central Texas Business Leaders Association, a man with a lot to lose. Elizabeth's Instagram painted perfect refined living, charity luncheons, wine tastings. Martha's Vineyard vacations tagged #BlessedLife, all built on other people's money, including mine. Victoria's Facebook told the real story. Posts about our beautiful home with photos of the kitchen I'd paid for. Check-ins at expensive restaurants during months I'd covered their utilities. Last week's status, so excited for Christmas dinner with family, can't wait to show off our hosting skills. Our hosting skill, our home, our success. The narcissism was breathtaking. Marcus's LinkedIn profile gave me the first piece. His recent activity showed a new connection, Rachel Thompson, lifestyle editor at Austin Herald. I leaned back, looking at evidence spread across my screen. They'd made 3 critical mistakes. First, they'd underestimated me completely. Second, they'd gone public, which meant I could go public with my response. Third, they documented their entire privileged lifestyle online, creating a perfect catalog of hypocrisy. Rachel Thompson's profile, 43. Journalism degree from UT, 15 years at local papers, recent articles about charity events, restaurant reviews, lifestyle pieces, nothing controversial. A working journalist trying to make ends meet? Then I found it. A LinkedIn post from 3 days ago. Sometimes stories that seem straightforward have layers you don't see until it's too late. Journalism ethics matter, even in lifestyle pieces. Rachel Thompson was having second thoughts about the hit piece. She'd realized she'd been used. 5 minutes searching business directories confirmed it. 3 mutual connections between William and Rachel's editor. The story had been planted deliberately through William's banking network. Amateur hour. Sorry, your response. I opened a new document and began typing. A timeline of 7.5 years of financial support. Bank statements, receipts, canceled checks, the down payment $47,000 from my business credit, kitchen renovation $18,000 from personal savings, 90 mortgage payments of $2,100 each, $189,000 total. $250,000, more than I'd spent on myself in a decade. My phone buzzed with Marcus' dad. People are asking about the newspaper article. This is embarrassing for my career. I deleted it. His career, his embarrassment, after everything I'd sacrificed. By evening, I had everything organized. Bank statements, receipts, photos of purchases I'd funded, the newspaper article with my notes documenting each lie. December 24th was circled in red. Victoria's Facebook showed Christmas dinner for 12 people family. Friends, neighbors, social circle members. People who read the Austin Herald and formed opinions based on what they saw. People who deserved to know the truth. But first, I had a phone call to make. Rachel Thompson had posted about journalism ethics for a reason. The journalist wasn't the enemy I thought she was. The call to Rachel Thompson changed everything. I found her number through the Austin Herald's website and dialed at 9 in the morning. Rachel Thompson speaking. Miss Thompson, this is Michael Anderson. You wrote an article about me 3 days ago. A long pause. Mr. Anderson, I was hoping you might call. Were you now, and why's that? Because I think we were both used by the same people. Can we meet? 30 minutes later, I sat across from Rachel at Mozart's Coffee on Lake Austin. She was younger than her photo suggested, with tired eyes of a journalist working too hard for too little pay. I need to apologize first, she said, sliding a manila folder across the table. I should have done more research. Inside were printed emails, phone records, and handwritten notes. William Hayes contacted my editor directly, said he had a story about elder abuse, about an unstable family member. He provided your photo, background information, even suggested the winter storm angle. There was no winter storm. I know that now. I checked weather reports after having doubts. She pointed to an email. Hayes specifically requested I not contact you for comment, said you were mentally unstable and might become violent. William had orchestrated every detail, ensuring I couldn't defend myself. What made you suspicious? Your son Marcus reached out yesterday, wanted to clarify details about the story, but how he talked about you didn't match his father-in-law's picture. Marcus seemed more concerned about his reputation than your alleged mental health. And so I did real research. Found Anderson Trucking's business registration, your tax records, employment history. Michael, you're not some unstable driver barely scraping by. You own one of Central Texas's largest freight companies. She pulled out another document. Then I found this, 7.5 years of mortgage payments from Anderson Trucking to Wells Fargo. The same mortgage covering your son's house. I looked at the bank records she'd obtained. How did you get these sources at banks when stories don't smell right? I dig deeper. You've been paying their mortgage for years, haven't you? And they had no idea. They thought it came from her family's trust fund. Rachel shook her head. There is no trust fund. I checked. Victoria's family has money, but not nearly what they pretend. William's been living beyond his means for years. They needed your money more than you needed their approval. Perfect irony. While calling me worthless white trash, they'd been completely dependent on my support. What do you want? Miss Thompson, I want to write the real story, but I need your permission and evidence. I opened my briefcase, spreading contents across our table. Bank statements, receipts, photos, 7.5 years of documentation. Rachel's eyes widened. This is incredible. They've been living off your generosity while publicly humiliating you. When do you want this story to run? I checked my watch. December 23rd, 11:30. Christmas morning, right after I deliver the news in person. Rachel smiled. You're planning something for Christmas Eve. Victoria's hosting dinner for 12 people tomorrow night. Friends, family, neighbors, people who read your first article. And you're crashing the party. I'm going to educate them about perception versus reality. Can you have the follow-up story ready by Christmas morning? I can have it ready tonight. This is career-making material. We shook hands outside Mozart's. As I walked to my truck, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. Tomorrow night, 12 people would learn the truth about Michael Anderson. Christmas Eve would be their judgment day. Christmas Eve arrived crisp and clear. I'd prepared 12 manila envelopes, each containing bank statements, receipts, and photos documenting 7.5 years of financial support. I dressed in my best Navy suit and drove to Westlake Hills at 6:45. Their house glowed with warm light, cars filling the driveway, through the windows. I could see Victoria playing hostess. The front door was unlocked. I let myself in quietly, hearing laughter from the dining room. I walked into the dining room carrying my briefcase. 12 faces turned toward me with expressions ranging from surprise to horror. Victoria froze with her wine glass halfway to her lips. Marcus went pale. William and Elizabeth looked like they'd seen a ghost. Good evening, everyone, I said calmly, setting my briefcase on their marble sideboard. I hope you don't mind me joining your Christmas celebration. Victoria found her voice first. Michael, this is completely inappropriate. You need to leave immediately. Actually, as I said, opening my briefcase and pulling out the first stack of papers, I think your guests deserve to know who really paid for this dinner, this house, and the lifestyle you've been showing off. A woman I didn't recognize leaned forward with curiosity. What is he talking about? Victoria, he's having some kind of episode, Victoria said quickly. Marcus, call someone. But I was already moving around the table, placing a packet of documents in front of each guest. Here are the bank records, I said conversationally. 7.5 years of financial support, $189,000 in mortgage payments alone, plus the down payment, renovations, furniture, appliances, everything you see around you. The room went silent except for rustling papers as 12 people began examining the evidence. I watched their faces change as they started absorbing the numbers, the dates, the undeniable proof spread before them. This is, one man started, then stopped, staring at a bank statement. $189,000, repeated the woman across from him, her voice filled with disbelief. Victoria's perfect composure was starting to crack. It's more complicated than it looks. Michael volunteered to help us. We never asked. Actually, I interrupted, pulling out copies of the newspaper article. Let's also talk about what you told the media about me. I placed copies of Rachel's hit piece on the table. Several guests immediately recognized my photo from the story that had run 4 days earlier. William's face had gone from red to ashen. Elizabeth sat rigid in her chair, her wine glass forgotten in her hand. The gray-haired man in an expensive sweater looked up from the bank statements, then at the newspaper article, then back at William and Elizabeth with growing understanding. "William," he said slowly, "what exactly is going on here?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees as 12 people began connecting the dots between the financial evidence in their hands and the newspaper story they'd read about the unstable truck driver. I smiled and stepped back, letting the evidence speak for itself. The reckoning was about to begin. The gray-haired man in the expensive sweater set down the bank statement and looked directly at William. "William, explain this to me. According to these documents, Mr. Anderson has been paying your daughter's mortgage for 7.5 years, nearly $200,000. William's mouth opened and closed like a gasping fish. "It's not that simple, Richard." "Then make it simple," Richard replied coldly. "Because this newspaper article painted him as an unstable truck driver who abandoned you at the airport. But these bank records show he's been financially supporting your family for years." An elegant woman in pearls held up a receipt. "Victoria, this shows Michael paid $18,000 for your kitchen renovation. You told our book club your family's generosity made it possible." Victoria's face flushed red. "That's taken out of context." "What context?" interrupted another guest, waving a bank statement. $2,100 monthly for 90 months? That's not family help. That's him paying your mortgage while you lived like you were wealthy. Elizabeth finally found her voice. "Michael insisted on helping. We never asked for his money." I stepped forward. "Actually, Elizabeth, let me share what you really thought." I pulled out my phone and read from screenshots. Quote from Victoria: "My father-in-law is just a broke truck driver who thinks his little contributions matter. We humor him by letting him think he's helping." Gasps echoed around the table. And here's another: "Michael is white trash who doesn't understand he's beneath people like us. At least Carmen knew her place before she died." The silence was deafening. Several guests stared at Victoria and Elizabeth with disgust. Richard stood up. "Elizabeth, did you actually say that about this man's deceased wife?" "It's taken out of context," Elizabeth protested, voice shaking. "What context makes calling someone's dead wife white trash acceptable?" demanded the woman in pearls. William tried regaining control. "Michael has been having mental health issues, financial problems. I laughed. "Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce myself properly. I'm Michael Anderson, owner and CEO of Anderson Trucking, one of Central Texas's largest freight companies. My company generates over $50 million annually." 12 faces stared in shock. While they called me a broke, unstable truck driver, I was funding their entire lifestyle. They thought the money came from Elizabeth's family trust fund. "There is no trust fund," said a man I recognized as a local banker. "I've handled the Hayes accounts for years, and William, you've been living beyond your means since retirement." William's face went purple. "That's confidential. Not when you've been defrauding this man and lying publicly," the banker replied. Richard picked up the newspaper article. "So, William, you contacted the press to destroy the reputation of the man who's been keeping your daughter financially afloat for 8 years. We thought he was becoming unstable." "You thought he was becoming inconvenient," interrupted the woman in pearls. Victoria made one last attempt. "You're only hearing one side. We're hearing the side with bank statements and documentation," Richard said coldly. "What's your side?" "Victoria, that you've been taking $200,000 from someone you call white trash." Elizabeth stood abruptly. "We don't have to listen to this." "Actually, you do," said the banker, "because this borders on elder abuse. Taking nearly $200,000 while systematically destroying his relationship with his own son, the social destruction was complete. 12 people who'd respected William and Elizabeth now looked at them like criminals. Marcus spoke, voice barely audible. Dad, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. I know, son, but your wife did, and her parents orchestrated it. I closed my briefcase. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Tomorrow morning, the Austin Herald will run the full story. I wanted you to hear the truth first. As I walked toward the door, eruption began. Voices raised in anger, chairs scraping, complete rejection of their former friends. Richard's voice carried above others. William, Elizabeth, I think you should leave. Now. I stepped into the December night. Through windows, I could see chaos continuing, guests confronting hosts, phones taking pictures of evidence, complete collapse of everything William and Elizabeth had built. It was the most beautiful Christmas music I'd ever heard. In January, the real story finally came to light. Rachel Thompson's follow-up article ran Christmas morning with the headline, The Truth About Michael Anderson, How a Successful Business Owner Was Manipulated by Media and Family. The story detailed everything William's banking connections, the planted hit piece, financial records showing nearly $200,000 in support, and the racist comments about Carmen. My phone rang constantly for 3 days. Former customers apologizing, business partners expressing outrage, the Austin business community rallying around one of their own. William Hayes resigned from the Central Texas Business Leaders Association within a week. Elizabeth was removed from 3 charity boards. Their Austin social circle had evaporated overnight. But the sweetest vindication came in March. The letter arrived Tuesday morning, certified mail, notice of default, final demand for payment. 3 months of missed mortgage payments had caught up with Marcus and Victoria like a tsunami. $8,400 in arrears, 14 days to bring the account current or face foreclosure on the house I'd helped them buy. I set the letter aside and returned to my coffee. Interesting, but not my problem anymore. Marcus knocked on my door Thursday evening. No longer the confident man who'd excluded me from Christmas, but someone who'd aged a decade in 3 months. Dark circles, wrinkled suit, desperation clinging to him. Dad, we need to talk. I let him in. He looked around my house like seeing it for the first time, new furniture bought with my first mortgage-free paycheck. Fresh paint on walls that hadn't been updated because every dollar had gone to his lifestyle. Nice place, he said quietly. It's what happens when you spend money on yourself instead of people who don't appreciate it. He perched on my couch uncomfortably. Dad, I'm so sorry about Christmas dinner, the newspaper, how Victoria's parents treated you. I should have defended you years ago. Yes, you should have. The house is in foreclosure. We can't make payments without... He stopped, realizing how that sounded. Without my help, I finished. Without the money I sent monthly while you let your wife's family treat me like garbage. His face crumbled. I chose them over you, and now I've lost everything. The house, Victoria's respect, her parents' approval. You'll figure it out, I said, not unkindly. The same way I learned to live without a son who respected me. He started crying quietly. I lost you, didn't I? Marcus, you didn't lose me. You gave me away. There's a difference. Is there any chance you could forgive me? I forgave you months ago. But forgiveness doesn't mean going back to the way things were. It doesn't mean resuming payments for a lifestyle that came with conditions. Then what does it mean? I walked to my mantle where Carmen's photo sat next to a new picture. Me with Diana Martinez's family at Easter dinner. The first holiday with people who actually wanted me there. It means if you want a relationship with me, you'll build it from scratch. It means showing respect instead of demanding I earn it. He nodded slowly. Understanding that respect wasn't something to take for granted. The one years the house, Chinchurtum, isn't my problem anymore. You're a grown man. Get a job that covers your bills. Buy something you can afford. Stop living beyond your means. He stood, shoulders straight for the first time. You're right about everything. At the door, he turned back. Dad, seeing you stand up for yourself at Christmas, I was embarrassed but proud too. Good, maybe there's hope for you yet. After he left, I poured good whiskey and stepped onto my porch. Spring was coming to Austin, trees budding, air warming with promise. My phone buzzed with a text from Diana Martinez. Dinner Sunday, kids want to show you their school projects. I smiled and typed back, wouldn't miss it. Real family was something you found with people who actually wanted you there. Everything else was expensive theater, and I was done buying tickets to shows where I wasn't welcome. The whiskey tasted like freedom, and the future looked exactly as bright as I was willing to make it. Sometimes justice comes with the sweetest vindication. Sometimes the greatest lessons come from the most painful betrayals. Michael's story reminds us that respect isn't something we beg for, it's something we demand through our actions. When family takes our love for granted, God gives us the strength to stand up and reclaim our dignity. Real family isn't defined by blood, but by genuine love and respect. These grandpa stories teach us it's never too late to set boundaries and walk away from toxic relationships. Michael discovered that the people who truly valued him weren't the ones he'd been desperately trying to please. God has a way of revealing people's true character when we stop enabling their behavior. He showed Michael that his generosity was being exploited and his love manipulated. But God also blessed him with wisdom to recognize real family and Diana Martinez people who welcomed him without conditions. The most powerful grandpa stories aren't just about revenge, they're about redemption and self-discovery. Michael learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say no and let people face consequences. His journey proves that when we honor ourselves, justice follows. These grandpa stories remind us that our worth isn't negotiable, and sometimes walking away is the strongest thing we can do. If this story touched your heart, share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family? Subscribe for more inspiring stories, and share this with someone who needs to hear that their dignity matters.